actually have records that are held for 73 years. And again, that gets back to the weird thing, which is working backwards. We had here in California, 140 people were killed by a heat wave in July. A couple of years ago, in Europe, there were 20,000 people killed by a gigantic heat wave that they were totally unprepared for. Yeah, right. Unbelievable thunderstorms hit St. Louis and all different areas of the country, and especially in odd seasons all during 2006. It's probably going to be the second warmest year on record, and the first 11 months of 2006 was the second warmest, I think, on record since. The thing is, all of the warmest years on record are since 2000. In other words, they're all they're all recent years, and right now it's like in New York, they have had a very warm winter up there, and yet you go out to Colorado, you wouldn't know it. You would not know it.
Now, here's something I'm worried about, Billy, and I know you're not a forecaster and you have no way of knowing which way this totally mixed up system is going to go. Nobody knows. It's chaos. But I'm here in the desert, and as you know, in the summer, near Death Valley, our temperatures, they can hover between 115 and 120 at its worst. Now, there wouldn't be a whole lot of change that would be required in an upward movement that way, would we, to make this area uninhabitable for human beings.
That's right. That's absolutely correct. And you can have a situation that can develop I think it's actually a little farther south of you. I think that the places to be worried about are more like Tucson and Phoenix. Because they are, or if you be really concerned, central India has a couple of times in the past few years approached the 130 mark, which is where the human, 127, 130, where the human body becomes unable to process the heat. Right. And of course, if you get much above 120, as you probably know, air conditioning begins to not work. That's right. Begins to fail. And it keeps the temperature down 20 or 30 degrees below what it is outside. So it's 95 and something. Well, that's not helping a lot. Anyway, at those temperatures, human body becomes unable to, a normal human being body can't deal with heat, not built to. And people begin to die of heat stroke, even sitting still and not moving in the shade. And that, we come close to that a couple of times in India, closer than we actually have in the United States. So it can happen anywhere. It can happen. It can have a radioactive action.
That's what I meant.
Yeah. So
I'm rather concerned about that. Or it could go the other way, and this chaotic system could suddenly turn the desert into a cooler place, putting the heat elsewhere. Who knows?
Well, you had a hurricane come up through there a couple of years ago. I think you were still in the state.
That's correct, yes.
Pieces of a hurricane came up through there. That was interesting. That was very, very interesting with weather patterns like that. That's not something you're going to see every day, even now. But let's move on now and start to talk about what it has been like in the past. And so what I want to do is to go back 13,000 years. And this is going to be discouraging and encouraging because we're not close to how bad it has been. And after all, despite what I'm going to talk about, life survived. And we're still here. There's a kind of arrogance called a Clovis foot, which 13,000 years ago, something happened. that all people who did Clovis points suddenly disappear. There are no more Clovis points after that. They're called Alpha points. Now, you find something interesting when you dig down. Archaeologists looking to find the Clovis layer, they look for a little black strip in the soil called the black mat. Tell me what that is. That's a mat of algae. You find it in Illinois, you find it in Oregon, you find it in New Mexico. Where did it come from? It came from flooding when, in a matter of apparently days, the Laurentian Glacier, this gigantic glacier, actually was destroyed and vaporized and melted. The entire continent was covered with water. This water grew algae. It slowly sank down, and that algae died on the surface when it dried out, and that's now the rock mass.
What could do that?
Well, here's what it apparently was. We now have to go back to 41,000 years ago, when a star was supernova. The first thing that happened is radiation moving out. The star was about 150 light years from Earth, moving out from the surface of the star at nearly light speed, goes out into the universe. 41,000 years ago, this hit. What it would have looked like to people was a huge blue-colored second sun would appear in the sky all of a sudden with no explanation. Now, the smart guys, they did. Or maybe the scared guys. Everybody who didn't hide died. In Australia, all down over 200 pounds in weight died because they were cheated with gamma rays and they got excessive radiation exposure. This is the time when human beings develop all kinds of different blood tests. They're very unusual animals. In most animals only have one blood type, but we've got a whole bunch of different blood types. And the reason is that this large animal, human being, was smart enough to take shelter, and so we survived with mutations. Now, something happened a few years after, a few thousand years after, 36,000 years ago. All of a sudden, in southern France and northern Spain, adolescent kids out on the Indigo children today suddenly began to paint these extraordinary paintings on page. Now, we figured out recently, scientists figured out that these were done by adolescents because they make this conclusion on the side of the canvas. They find in the cave positioning of the paintings and the known size of adolescents and adults at that time. They were literally, the kids suddenly broke through to a whole new level. And you know where they were? They were on the exact opposite side of the galaxy that we are now, 13,000 years ago. And halfway around it, just about to cross through the plane of the galaxy, just exactly the opposite place where we were then. The Lion predicted this in a tremendous long calendar that these changes would take place. And I submit to you that there is something bigger going on here than any of us can understand. When we talk about it on a microscope or a small level of our weather changes that we're facing right now, on a much larger level, something else, something bigger and something infinitely more mysterious is going on.
You don't suppose that there's any relationship between that and, again, going back to the Sparks interview, the changes going on in human beings right now, with respect to autism and that sort of thing. There's a basic, profound change going on, and I can't quite put my finger on it. The Sparks interview sure turned me on to it.
You can't put your finger on it because you're inside it.
Yeah.
You can't, if you're if you're in an ocean current, going in an ocean current, you don't know it. You're moving, but you don't know it. It's the same thing. If you're in the sea, you're in a tsunami. You don't know there's passing under you, but the people on the shore are going to find out. We're right out in the ocean with change right now, and we haven't reached the shore yet, so we don't know what that's going to be like. But I do know if you talk about interesting times, I mean, the ancient Chinese had no idea what interesting times really were. If they had realized what it was really going to be like, they would have run like hell with it. They would have raised about that. Maybe within interesting times, they did occur.
Interesting times lately. Is there any relationship between the weather changes, perhaps what's going on with the sun, and the geologic shakeups we're going through? I mean, we just had an earthquake in Taiwan. It took out every single fiber cable in most of Asia. Suddenly went dark information-wise and telephone-wise. I mean, it just cut everything off. Is there any relationship to the geologic activity?
Well, this could be. A couple of years ago, it was 2 years ago, Japan hit by a real big chain of typhoons, just one after another, 19 or 20 of them in a row. And they began to have earthquakes that saw quite severe in Japan because the water had literally penetrated down into and lubricated the fault. But I think also that the sun plays a large role in this that we don't understand here. That heavy duty solar activity results in, on the earth, more volcanic activity, more unrest in the planet, and more radical weather activity. I think that there is a connection there that we don't fully understand.
I ever agreed with you that we were coming up to a break, so hold it right there. Yes, the geologic activity became so intense that the Japanese began doing surveys of the bottom of the ocean, trying to figure out what was going to happen to them next. Interesting times? Oh, yes indeed, baby. We're on a ride. I'm Mark Bell. Chris from Fresno, California says, "Aren't enough with the weather report. Boring as hell after 2 hours." Well, Chris, I suppose if you looked at it as a weather report, yes, indeed it would be. But gee, Chris, I want you to look carefully around you. The North and the South Pole of our world, this little world that we tread around on, are melting. Not slowly, but quickly. We're about to be navigating across the North Pole where there was ice and there is no longer ice. Chris, these are profound changes in the world. This is not a weather report. This is a kind of a summation of changes that are going on that even we cannot explain a final destination of. So Chris, if you want to regard it as a weather report, go right ahead. But I can assure you, my friend, it's a great deal more. We'll be right back. On the other hand, Maddie in Buffalo, New York says, "Hey, we broke another record of 55 degrees here today and went through all the week. No snow for Christmas, as Whitley just mentioned. Record snow and a storm here, 10/12/06. Not good for our health and plant life here. We're going to get a late storm, and all hell is going to break loose, will it?"
Well, what I'm going to do, I want to go back again to the past, and because I'm trying to kind of bring this all together in a bigger way. And I thought this isn't really a weather report, but we're finished. I also want to talk about the UFO wave, which and let's do that in the second half of this hour.
Yeah, it's well underway.
There's an amazing UFO wave going on in this world that we need to talk about, and then I'll talk about a possible amazing that happened in South Africa a couple of days ago that nowhere in the media except on my website.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so we got a lot to talk about in that area. So, but anyway, let's go back to the day when 80 million other large animals died, and why. And now we're going back again 30,000 years. The second wave of that supernova we're talking about, the slower stuff, hit. This stuff, it was traveling at much slower speed. This is solid stuff. Things like tiny particles, iron, and large comet, these little comet-like materials that came out of the supernova hit the Earth and the whole solar system. Now, some scientists I'm going to be interviewing on Greenland shortly have discovered why all of them still died with food in their mouths, and there was this sudden, unbelievable climate change taking place. The reason they found that these animals had tiny particles of iron embedded in their tusks and even in their bones, they literally dropped dead where they stood with these tiny microscopic invisible particles moving at 3,000 miles an hour, came and swept over the whole continent, hit and killed everything, killed it all. That's incredible. Incredible. Now, I'm waiting somewhere that gets back to the West, folks. Be patient with it, folks. I expect the stuff I know, but never mind. The next thing that happened is something hit what is called the Laurentian Glacier. And it hit it. This is the glacier that was over at that time over northern Illinois and most Canada, the northern half of New York State, and on into northwestern, northwestern United States. It hit with such force that flying glaciers impacted the Mexico. I mean, I'm telling you, all these little craters in the Carolina, over a million of them, called the Carolina Bays, were created by this flying ice. The central part of this glacier was vaporized literally in a day, in a moment. And this full of water that we talked about, that covered not only North America, but the whole world. And it began memory time. It's called Noah's flood in the Bible. And before that, he had it Bill College. And in North America, it sent a torrent of water across down the central United States. It was 300 miles wide. Trillions of gallons poured into the Gulf of Mexico. And I will admit that the people who really understood, and maybe not with, they had exquisite instincts that we have lost, and I think that's what their science was. They understood the way the universe actually works. They made these calendars that the Mayans preserved, and the extraordinary engineering abilities that we see at the great platform in Baalbek in Lebanon, in the Great Pyramid, and the fortress of Sacsayhuaman in Peru. Unbelievable achievement of engineering from the distant past came from there. They were totally destroyed by this event, but they left behind a warning. 13,000 years later, we better listen to them because they predicted what is happening now somehow.
You know, what you said, hit the mountains and the whole world, it almost sounds like a cosmic shotgun blast.
Exactly. Now, we're on the other side of the galaxy at this point from where that was. I mean, the star is still around. It's, obviously, traveling with us is still approximately 150 light years away, but it's not a source of danger anymore. We don't think. There is another star, however, out there, which looks, it's the type of star that could become a supernova. And the interesting thing about this is, it's 150, also about 150 light years away. If it came up to supernova 150 years ago, we will find out about it without warning. Absolutely without warning. And you have to ask yourself, that the people that developed these calendars know so much that they knew that was about to happen too? I don't know.
And if they did, how did they have that primitive knowledge? I mean, it's sophisticated on one hand, but primitive on the other. Had to be.
I have a theory about that. I think that at that time, in the evolution of development of the human species, we had what I described a minute ago as exquisite instincts. We had an instinctual intelligence that during this catastrophe, there's a fascinating book by Barbara Van Cloud called Catastrophe. She talked about how what happened back then literally traumatized this species. We are a species living in post-traumatic stress disorder as a species. And that's why we don't have those exquisite instincts anymore. We're struggling kind of half blind with our modern science and we have a need to go down step by step by step. We can't just kind of let it happen in our minds the way they did. I think that's the change. I think that's the difference. And you know, you were talking to your listener at the top of the show was talking about all the land on the media about the UFO sighting over Bulgaria.
Yes, yes.
What's so funny? I mean, why is it funny?
Well, the only reason it's funny to me is the irony of the people who say they have no recollection of anything of that sort. Now, mind you, these were pilots. These observations, United Airlines pilots up there. and everybody else was unbelievable.
Apparently an intelligently guided craft of non-human or unknown origin was seen by a large number of airline employees and pilots, and everybody's laughing about it. Well, it's funny though, right? I'm sorry, it's not funny, it's extraordinary. An amazing event has taken place, and we have to push it away. This is our weakness speaking. Now, let's go on and talk a little bit more about, just in general, the amount of UFO activity recently. I put up on my journal. There's not the journal that's up there now. It's one immediately before that. If you go to Wikie's journal on the website, click on you can find it immediately. It's about the fact that we are really, at this point, ready. I mean, we can handle contact with practically anybody. And it's not like it was even 50 years ago when we were primitive in our understanding that the average person is now very used to the idea that contact is some kind of, even understanding that it might not be contact with aliens, it might be that something entirely different is going on. We're able to do that. Now, could it be that somebody is there trying to reach us, even if they're from the future? Maybe they're trying to reach us more directly so that they can make more direct change and let us know what we need to do to enable them to continue to exist.
Well, Whitley, I think that I could make a case that since 1947 and accelerating to today, we have been getting prepared for contact by our own media. Now, maybe it's simply a coincidence, a fascination with science fiction. I have no idea, but it's been movie and novel media preparing us for contact.
Well, I would agree that something like that, because I'm tangled up in it, frankly. Obviously, I think you're part of it.
You're actually part of it.
Yeah, I know it. I mean, you are, yeah, exactly. You're kind of saying to the choir here.
Yeah, I'm part of it. I'm also part of it. I mean, look at what I do for a living.
I don't think anyone can agree more. Interestingly enough, I don't have any hidden agenda either. Nobody comes to me and says, do this and do that and now do this at all. It just happens in my life. It just is the way my life is. The same way I know you do well. You don't have any secret CIA control.
No, I don't. I know, but I stopped trying to deny it. I did that years ago, and so did Bob Gates.
We are sorry about that. And the thing that's interesting about it is it's bigger than any factor of control. There's something else. There's a great mystery of other. And when we're getting close to the top of the hour, we're going to go on back to I want to get to this South African crash.
Please.
It's down the bottom of our front page, and it pretty well blew my mind when I read this. It happened on Saturday in South Africa. And, you know, a little town, and if you go on and see a map of where they're going to click on there, just smack. They have a thing here where you can click on the satellite map of the actual area, the detailed satellite map. What happened was this: 4:33 in the morning, the administrative manager of this little town, South Africa, and she began to hear a noise. She sounded like a UFO jet starting to engine. Then it increases. And so it sounds like massive screaming turbines. She looks outside and sees the clouds have turned bright orange. An object looking like a comet with an orange tail shoots out of the sky and hits the ground. Huge explosion. And now, so far, at least since Saturn, nobody has gone with it. And maybe they will find something. They don't it could be a meteor. It was a meteor. It's a very unusual meteor sound. That's quite unusual for a meteor to sound like that. But it's possible that's where it was. However, in Russia, in Siberia, a couple of months ago, there was a very similar meteor. And the government sent helicopters out to look for whatever it was that had crashed. The villagers said it crashed, and nothing happened. And they didn't find anything. And said it was just, there was a small touch or something. And they blew it off. And yet now it happens again in South Africa. And then there's this thing that happened in New Jersey, Freehold Township in New Jersey, in Korea yesterday, that they've been laughing about in the American media.
Maybe some of these things, when they were not crashes, maybe they were landings.
Well, I don't know about that. They could have been, I guess. Certainly not the thing that happened in New Jersey, because that's all we know is what happened in South Africa.
Well, until you get to the smoking rock, you really can't call it a meteor.
Well, the object that hit it initially, I mean, they're going to say it's a meteor instead of the thing that hit in Freehold Township. But depending on its composition, it could be, I mean, who knows what it was. It was a very strange event. What made it strange was that the object would be traveling at such a speed, such a velocity, that it would crash through a roof of a house and bend itself in a wall. It was so fast that it would have gone. It was simply falling. In other words, it was going much faster. It had velocity of its own, and yet it wasn't hot. Shows no evidence. It shows no evidence, no obvious evidence of being scorched. What's going on here?
I don't know, but when you add all this up, are we in the middle of or the beginning of another big UFO flap?
We could be, and if so, it's going to be just as peculiar as the other UFO flaps, where you have a combination. And if you go back to the late 40s, early 50s, when we were having these extraordinary UFO flaps, they were accompanied by a large number of seemingly meteoric events. You had the so-called ghost rockets in Sweden. You had the green fireballs in New Mexico. You had UFOs up in Roswell and up in the Pacific Northwest, and then eventually all across the United States. And so finally it culminated with this extraordinary extraordinary series of UFO sightings over Washington. This was the classic example of debunking from the Air Force with the swamp gas, which became a sort of international joke. But nevertheless, it has to look and feel with the same kind of thing. Now happening again. That accidentally this time, like something that's working and getting closer and closer each time it comes around. It's going to get a lot closer to this business. Wait and see.
So, we could be at the very beginning of yet another round, but since, for example, the Phoenix Lights, it's been pretty quiet, but it has the feel to it right now of the beginning of something big.
It does, absolutely. It really, really does. And there's also another thing that we're getting. It's the weird thing on our website. There's a lot of email. And I looked at a good bit of it. We have a volunteer looked at it before I did, thank God. It gets maybe as many as 1,000 emails, maybe 4,000, 5,000 a month. One of the things that they've been sending me consistently is very, very interesting. It's coming from different people around the world, not just the United States. They are reporting to seeing, some of them are describing in various ways, some of them are describing what look like gateways that are opening, that they see in the field, in the sky near their house. Angular kind of opening that seems to be opening into something else or somewhere.
Really?
And yes, and this phenomenon has never been, people haven't tried this use before. And I've been doing this for years, for years. And then all of a sudden we start to get a reaction emails about this. It's very strange that all suggests that something is kind of very quietly, as in the background, in view, kind of coming into focus. That's the word slowly.
All right, we'll leave right there. We will at the break. I know exactly what Whitley means. I get thousands of emails, and so we're in a position to kind of put things together. We read email after email after email. You can tell when something's happening and when something is coming. We'll be right back. Our memory sword is very short and convenient indeed. The poles of the world are melting and they call it a weather report. Whitley Strieber is here, he's my guest. He and I did a little book that became a movie that kind of kicked all this off in a way. And many of them are still kicking us. At any rate, I've had Whitley now for some time. So in a moment, it's your turn. Any questions? And there's quite a spectrum to talk about, from graves to the great UFO flap, if that's what it is. And it certainly appears to be, to a great deal of what he's covered about the planet. He's all yours, coming right up. George is taking a well-deserved day or two off, and I am filling in this time. My name is Art Bell. On the line with me is Whitley Strieber, and we're about to go to the phones if you're ready. Anything else you want to get in now, Whitley, just before?
Well, let's go right to the phones.
To the phones we go. Let's make it Tricia. How about Tricia in Northern California? You're on with Whitley.
Yes, good evening. Dr. Wonderful, you certainly have my attention, and I was wondering if you could recommend a website I can go to prepare my family for a life without water, electricity, and a grocery store.
I don't mean to laugh, but that would be quite a website, Whitley.
Well, anyone who's in a addiction, like a earthquake zone or a zone that is area that is prone to bad weather, should certainly have basic emergency supplies. Not ways to go. We've got water to last for a week and food supplies. Nothing special, just things we bought at the grocery store. And, we have a great radio, actually, great radio visit here. And, that kind of thing here. I think everyone should have that. I think
just talked about is right on the money. Wild card on Lee in Arkansas. You're on with Lee.
Thank you. I want to know if he's familiar with the quote that says, when Jesus Christ will return, he'll bring the heavenly host with them, and that might be the aspect of man who has indicated they're standing by in the heavens to evacuate humans and animals in case of a cold death.
All right, Whitley, there is the religious take on all this.
Well, in bullshit, interestingly enough, he brings up a fascinating point because I think about every 250,000 years, there is a magnetic pole shift on planet Earth, not as far as we know of actual turning over of the planet, but the magnetic pole shifts, and for a period of time, lasting upwards of anywhere from a few years to 1,000 years, we don't really know. The magnetosphere of the Earth is in chaos. Now, we know that in the past, this has not been associated with big extinction events, meaning that when this happens, solar energy is not so bad that it reaches the surface of the Earth. But we're living in a very different world now. We are living in a world that is absolutely dependent upon long electrolyte sensitive electronic circuits and so on and so forth. If we didn't have a magnetic field to guard us from solar radiation, to say the least, this society as we know it could not function, not for long. It would begin to break down in all kinds of complicated and eventually catastrophic ways. With that said, the whole is in the process of shifting. Scientists believe it's a very slow process. In other words, it'll take at least 1,000 years for it to be a state of chaos. But we don't actually know whether or not that is the case. So, yes, yet another thing that is changing now. We are in the middle, at the beginning phases that happened 200 or 300 years of one of these periodic versions manifestations.
Let's go west of the Rockies to Ann in Walnut Creek, California. You're on with.
And I'm so glad to hear the two of you tonight. Actually fascinating. I'd like to ask a question I've been wanting to ask for a long time. I'd like to ask you to bring in another element into the discussion to connect the dots between heart and everything we've been talking about. How heart may have been playing a role, maybe, could play a role for good or bad, and whether anything that it could that happened could possibly be attributable to heart. And last of all, is there any way you can think of that if we were in a electromagnetic celestial pickle, that heart could actually help?
Heart is an interesting subject for it's as you know, taken over by DARPA. It's ramped up to incredible levels, and it's playing with the ionosphere. So,
HAARP is using essentially microwave energy or solar energy to heat the ionosphere, and with unknown results. And I can assure you that they have never done any kind of environmental impact analysis of that. And what HAARP may be actually used for, supposedly, it is used to create a reflective area where they can reflect radar waves off of it and look down across the horizon of the Earth, use the radar to look down across the horizon of the Earth, the other side of the planet. What it's actually used for, given that we have satellites now blanket the entire planet with such a planet unnecessary, what it's actually used for is an entirely different question. I don't know. Dr. Nick Benson just got a lot of very interesting theories about that, and I do think this, and this is just generally true, where the secrets start, the freedom stops. And we absolutely, this government of the United States is got a cancer. It's the cancer of secrecy. This cancer has been growing ever since World War II and after World War II. Instead of backing away from secrecy that was so necessary during wartime, we founded the CIA and we embraced it. The CIA was the worst thing we ever made. Dwight Eisenhower warned us against the malicious military-industrial complex as he described it. And we now are suffering the consequences of that. Every American should have clear information about what things like heart are, what they do, and what their potential hazards are. We do not have that information.
No, we don't. We're looking at a chaotic system getting completely out of control. So, how to attribute any single influence on it is just virtually impossible. Wildcard line, Elizabeth, we're on here with Whitney.
Hello, Art. Hello, Whitney. I would like to ask you about these people that can help us stop this from happening. How we can get to them, how we can get them to listen to us. I have an idea. For one thing, my preacher, it's a little embarrassing to talk about my ideas, but he said the way to measure a man's maturity or a woman's maturity is by their love toward other people. So if we can get these people that can help us to stop the global warming, to realize that.
I'm confused. What people are you referring to?
Like Jason Lowe, who changes laws. Well, to change the subject, I would like to say that I heard the talk to a girl yesterday about this documentary that she watched. And, well, the Earth in the United States split in half and became two islands because of the glaciers and the floods and the cracks. And I would like to know if he knows anything about that.
All right, let's hold it there, Elizabeth. The U.S. cracking in half?
Well, I think that would be more productive to talk about. First of all, I don't think that anything like that is going to happen. I do think, though, that there is an increasing potential for earthquake in the central United States, being generated by the Newfoundland Fault, which in the early 19th century created a tremendous earthquake in that area and still very unstable. And unfortunately, it's an area of the country that is totally unprepared for earthquakes. Absolutely unprepared. The other thing is this, that there is a lot of study needed to understand what happened to cause the gigantic earthquake a couple of years ago at Christmas time that caused the tsunami, the 8.5 earthquake near New Zealand, off the coast of New Zealand that preceded it by a few days, the massive earthquake that occurred in northern Siberia recently, and just what is causing these very large earthquake swarms that keep appearing, and does this have significance? In other words, in other areas, like it was recently announced I believe by NOAA, or by the U.S. Geological Survey, based in the state of California, that there was a really relatively high likelihood that the San Andreas Fault was going to give away its northern half, jeopardizing San Francisco, and potentially the Sacramento Delta, which feeds water to the whole southern half of the state. So, how this is the sort of thing that we don't understand well enough yet. And she brings up a point, as far as the United States itself cracking in half, I think basically just don't worry about what's going to happen.
Yeah, that probably would have been, although the Newfoundland Fault is a place in an interesting position to, if it was big enough, I suppose, accomplish roughly that, but not
Well,
really.
it could have a 7.5 bigger earthquake generated by that fault. It's a strong enough, it's big enough fault to do that.
Bob in Burbank, California, your turn with Whitley.
Now, the thing I broke the cycle, you're talking
You're right.
I think it's a conspiracy. I got that. But anyway, let's say it's on this area we're doing. And just going back to the UFO thing, I don't know if the UFO phenomenon years ago, aviation for 11 years, USS was in the Telex, and then you don't see weird anomalies. But back to the Chicago UFO, I did some research on that. And I received an email of the object. It was a black triangle, and this would come out of the bottom of what I heard. And so let's think about this perspective for a minute. What is happened, a couple weeks ago, whatever, 2006. Now, almost everybody in the United States has a cell phone. 90% of all cell phones have cameras in them. Now, tell me that it's not one person out there, those people on the tarmac, that did take a picture of UFO with their cell phone and was hanging around in the air for about 10. Yeah, I think we should try to retrieve some of those photos and let's let the government team and everything. The American said it sort of does the problem. That was just when I worked at Lockheed when we had UFOs flying around there. But a lot of things that was good national security to break it on that and it was sort of set up.
Well, the caller, you just said, you said a moment ago that, I just lost my train of thought. What did you say? Oh, yes, you referred to Chicago. Now, I wanted to ask you if you also feel that we're at the beginning of another UFO flap, a big period of time when we're going to get a lot of sightings, if not a landing.
You're absolutely correct. The UFO flap happened now in a 20-year cycle. And we are coming into that flap right now. And I'm actually, what's really amazing about UFO phenomena is you can actually, in every single, there's a major UFO event in a particular area, you can usually listen to the historical event. Like the one largest historical event in our existence was World War II, or Canada. But it's major earthquakes in the local area. You will see everywhere. There's recent catastrophe there. There's no more probably documenting historical events other than I can understand it as a happening. I've worked with the undercover on contract with a company, and I was downtown when we got word of people about being released in downtown Los Angeles. I was with the agents out there, and I'm telling you, when I was out there was a UFO right in LA. We're looking for it. The house was the key word was near the library. There's a building 2 blocks across the library. There's supposedly been not there a small strip light on the 66th floor of the building. There's a camera destroyed in LA. At this point, I swear to God, there's a cylindrical built object the size of a small car floating. It looks like a balloon. It's hovering against the building right where this mark is supposed to be placed. The area that we got an FBI helicopter coasting near the crash when it's all UFO.
All right, well, consider for a moment that all of this began shortly after we detonated the first nuclear weapon in the world. And it's been going on ever since. And as he points out, Whitley, it has occurred around major events, around major military moves. We've had these flaps.
Yeah, that's very true. And in fact, the first one occurred before that. It occurred during World War II when we had the Foo Fighters and others and the
Major event, a war.
and the great Los Angeles UFO event where they will fire the UFO over Los Angeles during the early part of the war years. So, getting back to the Chicago, they've been researching on my website to see if there's anything that anything more. We did find something interesting. December the 4th, the FAA issued an information from operators saying that PA can return on collision avoidance with the airplanes has been occurring. They attributed it to returns from U.S. Navy craft, the type of transponder on U.S. Navy craft. They do commented that these
Well, hold the thought. I'm sorry, I've got to do it right here. I'm Ardell. Indeed, here I am, a country where they turn back time. They are out there, and I suggest that most Americans, when you get the opportunity, go and visit one. The Year of the Cat. That song just has a great deal of meaning to me. Good morning, everybody. I'm Ardell. Whitley Strieber is my guest. What is it we're doing? We're doing a special weather report, and we'll be right back. Well, I had to rudely interrupt you because of the clock, Whitley. You were talking about a notice to air traffic types about what was going to be appearing, almost as though they knew.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I missed the cue at the bottom of the hour. I was talking about an FAA notice about phantom signals occurring on accident, collision avoidance equipment in planes, and they were referring primarily to Lindbergh Field in San Diego, and saying that interestingly enough, that the source of it was unknown because the naval ships that might have been the source of these things in the harbor had the transponders that could have caused this turned off. And of course, no one makes any claims whatsoever about this, about it being, about what else might be causing this. But you have to think that maybe they're trying to land. Didn't work in San Diego, so they're trying Chicago.
Let's go all the way to the other side of the world. Shane in Melbourne, Australia.
Hello, how are you? It's nice to speak with you.
Quite well. Thank you.
You speak very differently back in the Kingdom of Naya as to the Philippines.
You think so?
Most definitely. It's a two-part question. How do you feel about Robert Felix's take on it, where he feels that we're entering global warming to be followed by an ice age? And I accept that climate change is real. What possible solutions? I mean, you've either got Shelley Yates who's doing a private grid on the 17th of July, 11/11, with a mass consciousness experiments, or else you've got Richard Hoagland's hyperdimensional physics solution.
I'll tell you, we'll get both points of view. My point of view is that it is changing and that there's not a damn thing we can do about it. Whitley has a slightly more optimistic point of view. Whitley?
Well, it's true that I do have the problem of being a little bit optimistic simply because I look at human history and I see all the things that have gone wrong across the span of time that we have been on this earth. We're still here. And I just have a feeling that, yeah, I agree with you. I think a lot of this is going to unfold and there's not a lot we can do about it. And there will be many people who suffer because of it. But in the end, there'll be three species that are still here. The roaches, the rats, and us.
Well, I don't disagree with that. I'm not suggesting that the world is about to be wiped out. I'm just saying these changes are coming. Correction, these changes are occurring now, and I do not believe we can stop it.
Well, I agree with you there, and I guess my optimism comes from, I'm talking about our ability to cope with them. We can reduce our carbon dioxide emissions quite easily. And the fact that the big lie that we can't do that is the lack of leadership has been unfortunate because if you go on a country and you go to quick watch, you scroll down, there's a list that you can do it. As I said, it's 100 million people. This is going to completely change the whole profile of the atmosphere inside of 10 years. And a lack of leadership is why that doesn't happen. It's not even, they're not even hard. But that's going to change the parts like, you're right. It has changed the larger picture. It's too late for things like the Gulf Stream. That is going to happen. Whatever its consequences are, we don't know. But it is going to happen. The fundamental way the ocean currents work now is going to change. And it's going to change probably in our lifetimes. It could be really any time. And we're going to live with the consequences of that, whatever they may be.
West of the Rockies, you're on from Anchorage, Alaska. Kat with Whitley.
Hi, it's great to be speaking with both of you. Whitley, I wanted to ask you about something I saw, actually, it was 10 years ago, but the stuff you were talking about, gateways opening up, reminded me of it. I was driving between Visalia, California and Fresno, California with a bunch of friends. And it was at night, and there were no street lights out there, just the headlights, the very dark sky, and all of a sudden, the sky basically turned to daylight in kind of a slow flash, and then turned back to blackness. But we had time to, we were going like 50 miles an hour, and we broke entirely to a stop. Everybody in the car stopped and screaming, and I talked to people for months after that to see if I could find anyone that knew what happened. But I don't know, one other person that remembered it. Wondering if you know about this kind of phenomenon, or do you think it's related?
Well, it's sometimes related to, that can be a meteor, a large meteor, especially cloudy, with burning up and I mean, especially if it's a clear night, burning up and they can,
Backlighting the clouds, really.
yeah, they could be very dramatic and kind of play. At the same time, it could have been something completely unknown. The interesting thing about it was it was that big. It was a big energy release of some kind. They call it, because you don't light up all the funny style like that. You make it turn it into daylight for a few minutes enough. It was no flashlight, and it was nothing from an airplane, let me put it that way. It was either a natural phenomenon or a UFO.
To Florida and Stan on the Whitley Street.
Yeah, welcome back. Yes, great to hear you again. Well, good to talk with you. Are you familiar with the UFO incident in 1973 in the middle of the Atlantic?
The Atlantic. I was an air traffic controller for the U.S. Air Force at Lockheed Field in the Azores during the Arab-Israeli War. And we were supplying airplanes and munitions and all kinds of supplies to reinforce Israel during that war. And everything had to go through the Azores because our European partners told us we couldn't fly through there. And during the entire airlift, we had no less than one and sometimes multiple UFO visits every day. I mean, we were sending out, they were following our jets, having out final approach, and I literally several times turned jets around to try to chase them. And
Excuse me, is there anything recorded of this? Are there any records of all this that a person could get, freedom of information, whatever?
I have no idea. I know they sent somebody into the Pentagon to talk to all of us afterwards. If you can look up something called Operation Green Light.
Green Light. You said they sent somebody in to talk to you. What did that somebody say?
They were asking us what all we saw. I mean, they were really harming us. They were just, it was more like they were trying to figure out or keep an eye on what we were doing. And we knew they weren't the Russians, because we knew where all the Russian bears, their spy planes, trawlers and stuff were. I mean, we were sending out 23 Ohio.
Yes.
It's a sonar. Yeah, sure. And it's a plane. Yeah, and they have all kinds of, yeah, well, maybe, but they have all kinds of electronics for, detecting stuff. Right. Well, that's Operation Green Light. We were so
And something of this magnitude, I mean, if you had objects following, military craft, there would have been a lot of reports filed, and if we know the timeline and where, people can file information, freedom of information requests, and we can get information on this. So again, when was it, please?
it was during the Arab-Israeli airlift in the Azore Islands. It's been so long, I don't remember the date. I know it was in 1973.
Okay.
And like I said, during the entire airlift, we had not less than one UFO and a lot of times several every day. Now, one of the interesting things is a buddy and I, we took my camera and went out to the end of the island one evening to see if we could get a photograph, and we were met by security police that turned us around and told us to go back.
All right, I'm going to do a little bit of research on this. It's a very, very, very interesting story, and again, there should be a lot of records available. And a lot of times, the information is good for the plucking if you know where and when, and now we do. So let's see what we can do. Fascinating, how good.
Indeed it is. And, I know of another incident that I've done a little bit of research into, and that was during the Korean War in the Pacific, where a large cylindrical object appeared over the carrier battle group, and was absolutely an awesome experience. And the reason I'm pretty sure it happened is that we received so many letters from so many different people. We received letters from two different people who had been in the carrier battle group. Well, one of them a radar operator, and one of them a officer on one of the support ships, who I don't believe were connected with each other in any way. The letters came about a year and a half apart, and we have them. But it was apparently really remarkable. So these things do happen to military people.
All right, again, to another part of the world, Joseph in Alexandria, Egypt. Hi there.
How you doing, Omar? Nice to speak to you. And Mr. Woodley, my grandmother, actually my great-grandmother, lived to be 105. She was a mistress, however, she memorized the Bible. The entire Bible, the Old Testament, and the New Testament. It was a remarkable woman. She had a prediction. She always said about the end days. It's a constant event. Now, she was talking also about the 11,000-year cycle. Are you familiar with that? It's a real cure, absolutely. And that's what it is. And she said the planet Earth goes into a rejuvenation like a woman after a cycle. It's a good time after a woman after a cycle. They go different in milk, if you're familiar with that. And this is the same thing that's planet Earth right now. We're going into a freezing era, and that there's rejuvenation in a way. That's to me, it applies because cold kills a lot of viruses if you know that. And maybe that's what it is. That's a cycle, and that's a rejuvenation to planet Earth with all the contamination that human and actually. I don't contribute that entirely on human.
Thank you for the call all the way from Egypt. Clearly, we are on the cusp, the edge of something. Something big is close.
Let me just deepen the mystery a little bit, and here's something fascinating. The Old Testament was written during the sign of the Ram, the 2,300-year approximate cycle, the astrological cycle, which is that we're entering the age of Aquarius now. That was the age of Aries. And the Ram is the most mentioned animal in the Old Testament. Then we move to Pisces. And when we move to Pisces, the New Testament appears, and what is the symbol, of course, of Christ in the New Testament? The fisher. And the fish was the early symbol of the Christians. Now we move into the age of Aquarius. What happens to an Aquarius? Well, it's called Aquarius because the water in which the little fish is presumably been swimming poured out onto the land. Fish has got to learn to walk and to breathe on land. It's no longer supported by the water which has been the source of its life before. And somebody knew all of this. That's why the Bible is related to the huge astrological structures that are beneath the surface. That's why the states, if Graham Hancock is correct, I'm pretty sure he is. If you go back to the time of Leo, 10,000 plus years ago, you'll find the constellation of Leo rising behind the Sphinx every night. And because the Sphinx is only a couple thousand years old, I'm shocked that it's more like it is 10,000 years old.
Can I tell you heard the program with Graham?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh.
And I know Graham too.
Yeah.
So anyway, there is this huge structure here, a great plan, an enormous mystery. And those of us living at this time, which is obviously an end time of some sort, but like all endings, is also a beginning. We are very attuned to this extraordinary mystery. That's why there's a huge spiritual awakening taking place on Earth right now. On a religious level, from the most conventionally religious people to the most unconventional, there is this sense of something great in our presence, in the air, all around us, and within us. And it's true because there is a change of age taking place. We're part of it.
All right. Maybe one more. Lloyd in Calgary, Canada. You're on with Willie.
Oh, geez, been talking about 50 years and trying to get on here. Holy welcome. Finally got through, and for sure. I've got a couple of questions and a little bit of commentary. So first I'll throw questions out. I would like to know what Whitney thinks of the opposing theories, I guess, of global warming, in as much as it's a solar cycle, or I have heard another that said that we're currently suffering a bombardment of neutrinos that are heating the core of the Earth. And, that's an interesting question because there is a lot of change in the radiant atmosphere around our planet taking place right now. And there is also change taking place within the core of the planet. And we just don't understand this at all. But it may very well relate, and it may explain, for example, why it is, like off the coast of the Pacific Northwest, and this could be the reason why we were talking earlier about this El Nino ended up going backwards there. And it is that there is a large area of the land area beneath the ocean that is warm, that is heating for some unknown reason. There's a hot spot near Santa Barbara in the mountains near Santa Barbara, California too, where it's just there's a lot of heat coming up out of the ground. We don't understand why.
That's right. Whitley, there's so much we don't understand. One thing is clear that we're out of time. I mean, we're just flat out of time. The latest
Only time to be alive, whether we're out of time.
it is. Your book is the greatest. Latest is the greatest, right?
That's right.
All right, buddy, listen, I've got to come off here. I'm sorry, we could go on and on. Whitley, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
And good night, everybody. I'll
take a day off myself, I think, and be back for Saturday and Sunday on Mark Bell.